Those of you at the University of Michigan, I'm sure you're familiar with the North Library of Hatcher, and probably the Marxists among you frequently go down to the North Library 1A, the HV sections, past the pornography, past anarchism, and then you'll find those blue volumes from floor to the ceiling of Karl Marx's works in German, with on the blue spine, and then dangling from them the yellow and red page markers. And it really makes a kind of joyous part of the library. And so I did want to mention that. And have just a brief historical shout out there to the Soviet Union, thanking them for their subsidizing this work. Because when I started my studies of Marx in 1956, when I made my first purchase of work by Karl Marx, it was produced not by communists but by the Catholics, and it was I obtained it at a military army base in Frankfurt, Germany, and I read it at night underneath the covers. This was before Budapest rose in the fall of 1956, and I was just a sophomore in high school, and it was really hard to find Marx at that time, and of course that was the height of the Cold War, and far from there being joyous ribbons or easily accessed works in different languages, it was very much verboten. That meant it was forbidden, which is why, as a rebellious adolescent, I searched all over and found Marx in the I.G. Farben building there in Frankfurt, and that's where I read it. But the Communist Manifesto, my edition I still have. For this evening, I can make some remarks about the readings, and one was the London Hanged, the other was Magna Carta Manifesto, and the Magna Carta Manifesto ends in a way that might be pertinent to us. Just the last paragraph. There's three propositions that leap forward concerning the mass, the ideas, and the willingness to contribute to the planetary commons. One, there are more proletarians, both relatively and absolutely, on the planet, on the face of the earth now than ever before in history. So even as the conservatives trumpet the end of history, the class that can abolish all classes is a democratic possibility. Two, there are active movements of human commoning and worldwide demands to share wealth and safeguard common resources on every continent, from movements of urban gardening to transcontinental oil swaps, efforts of actual autonomous communism. Three, there's a militant movement that wages war against American imperialism and the terrorism on the planet for which it alone, more than any other power, is responsible. These propositions demand that we be up and doing. As left to themselves, they lead to defeat or disaster. The charters of liberty do not call for regrets or nostalgia, and certainly not for the restoration of medievalism. This whole book was about Magna Carta, the Middle Ages. And it's not our duty to fulfill their promise, but they remain ready, those charters of liberty, as this book tried to show, to help us fulfill our promise.
What page was that?
I don't know, it's the last page. And, we can find it.
Yeah, I can find it. Don't worry.
No, it's too late, Odile, I'm already worried. You know, you ask a scholar what page? Page 280.
280.
All right. Now, where was I?
The Charters of Liberty.
Yeah, but I was going somewhere, man. It's okay. Page 280. I guess 281. That would be the next page. It's important here. I'm talking to myself to stay in a good mood. Coming over here, I was thinking of the dignity of the subject and of those who I've met in person in the past who taught me about it. You know, starting from Isaac Deutscher when I heard him speak in New York, going on to some other teachers, you know, people I've heard speak around the world, and I thought it was quite it could be an occasion, you know. I was really honored to be asked by students and young scholars at the University of Michigan to come and talk, especially. So this was, this is the role that I'd like to be on. And at the end of 20 minutes or 15 minutes now, you know, I'd definitely like to be quiet. But just for the time being, I'd like to proceed here. Because, getting back to the commons, you see, the word is related to communism. From each according to their ability, and to each according to their needs, you know, as a summary of communism. And I'm ready to argue, Matt, or to, you know, this is why I brought Das Kapital with me, in order to show, to have a discussion about communism and the commons in terms of Karl Marx. It's really interesting to me and significant that the subject of the commons that we have been on the planet discussing, from Oaxaca to Johannesburg. I don't know about Afghanistan or Pakistan, but I know something about them historically, that there's a discussion about commons all over the world. And then a couple weeks ago, Eleanor Ostrom, our colleague at the University of Indiana, won the Nobel Prize for her work on the governance of the commons. So this discussion is very vibrant and is definitely a sign of our times. And I am certainly ready and willing to talk about it. I asked you to read chapters 1 and chapter, was it 10?
10, yeah. 10.
Of The London Hanged for a couple reasons. That London Hanged was published in, I think, first in 1990, but it had been, I started work on it in 1967, 66, 30 years earlier, because the people of my experience in the proletarian movement in the United States our experience was that through the experience of criminalization. In other words, very rapidly, in the middle of the 1960s, we began to experience one of the highest, most noble, most spiritual movements expressed through our songs in the American Civil Rights Movement, very rapidly through a process of criminalization, to find that the leading part of the American movement, the African American Black Power movement, was being seriously criminalized. And this process of criminalization affected everyone at that time and since. This is a proposition I'd like to put on the table. Certainly, it motivated me to begin to study crime in its history. This was partly motivated by ideals, the ideal that everyone is able to change. And And that's why I started by saying that I first learned about Karl Marx on an American military base as an adolescent. That's why I said that.